So this video right now is going to be about how I am only human. But the first thing I have to talk about is the fact that my dad, the greedy framer, right now, after all the blackmail price tags and asking me if I would be willing to commit incest with someone in his in-laws that he could find for me, being asked only about a day or two ago through law enforcement. So you can actually ask law enforcement yourself whether this ad meant this, that it was sent to me over and over again every single day for the past week or so. What it basically meant with this ad, if it really did mean that he was trying to ask me if I was willing to sleep with one of his in-laws in exchange for illegal assurance of money, since he thought that he saw that he was about to lose and my brain savant was about to get unlocked. You can ask law enforcement yourselves if this is what he was asking for in those ads, except for asking me for expensive things like a Bentley car or things of that sort in nature, seen right there in the middle. Along with asking me for forgiveness over and over again every single day for making so many lies against me. Mafi means forgiveness. And then obviously his oldest trick in the book asked me if I was willing to commit incest with his own sisters in exchange for illegal assurances of money or not. Okay, this is also sent through law enforcement, so you know for a fact that it is why does Aunt May keep getting younger? Okay, this all right, so you can ask law enforcement about this. So while he's doing this, my dad, the greedy framer, that psychotic individual, at the same time he is asking for forgiveness with the Mafi means forgiveness. And at the same time, he is also making lies, fabrications, and exaggerations against me. Now, we already talked about the lies that my dad, the greedy framer, makes, and the ones that he's already been found making till now. Mainly, November 20th, 2025, he begged his framer sisters and law enforcement to make against me. Only on December 29th at 1:27 p.m. to start begging me for illegal assurances of money the second he's kicked out of the witness stand. Then, early January, he begged not law enforcement, the courts, to let him narrate again. And this time, once again, he has lies against me. These lies, by the way, the courts were trying to check to see if he's going to lie with the same lies that the government informant was already told were planned lies or not. Because if they are, he was going to do that, then this means that him and his framer sisters got together from before and they planned out lies that they were going to make in the trial together, which turned out to be exactly the lies that his framer sisters told the government informant that they had planned out more lies to make sure that my brain savant would enviously get locked up. The second he's told that the courts already knew on February 10th, 2026, that these were lies, he goes right over to incest, as we saw, February 11th through 17 a.m., asking me to commit incest with his sisters. Then again, on March 7th, 2026, same thing, porn stars pictured with his sister's name on it, despite being told February 11th that this is an open advertisement for incest. And then again, March 10th, 2026, with his other sister offering, big fat ugly old woman, being sent on March 10th and every single day afterwards as an illegal assurance of money scheme to try to get me to give him illegal assurance of money when my brain savant would get freed, seeing that I was not willing to do so. In April, he went to court very aggressively, realizing that there was nothing he could offer, no incest with his sisters, just definitely not his ugly old wife. Oh my God, she's so ugly. If you ever saw her face, you'd be like, it's a good thing you cover up. Now, right, recently, this psychotic individual is offering me incest with people in his in-laws. You can ask law enforcement, and this is exactly what it means. He's basically asking law enforcement to ask me if I'm willing to commit incest with his in-laws in exchange for illegal assurances of money when my brain savant would get freed. So basically, all these incest requests were already tried except for the in-laws one, the one with the sister, wife, and he tried all of his sisters, by the way. And he also sent me illegal blackmail price tags for illegal issuance of millions of euros all throughout February and March after he was caught with the two sets of lies, November 20th, begging his former sisters and law enforcement to make against me. And then again, early January, he sent me blackmail price tags for millions of euros after he found out that the second set of lies were also confessed lies to the government informant from before November 20th. So basically, now the entire month of February and the entire month of March, all he did was try different sisters of his and check to see, through law enforcement, by the way, so you can ask law enforcement, okay, and try different sisters of his and try to check to see if I would give him illegal assurance of money in exchange for sleeping with his big fat ugly old sisters. And he also tried his ugly, old, disgusting looking wife with her big beaver teeth. It was like, ew, man, like, you cannot pay someone enough to do this. This is disgusting. Anyways, so then after this, he went into court very aggressively and he abused everyone in court, mainly because he realized that there was nothing he could offer. And so my brain salon would get freed and artificial intelligence protected would come true and he would get not one penny of it. And so now the only thing that he had was to aggressively lie in court, use so much aggression and abusing people in court and in this trial that they would just get scared and back away and not say anything about it. He made his lies very aggressively in court throughout April, thinking that he could scare people off in the trial. What ended up happening was the court judge told him, Mr. Ansari, we're going to go through every single phone conversation, only because national security is not a joke, and you've already been caught lying twice, which means that if in early April you get caught lying again, while abusing everyone in court only because you weren't able to get your illegal assurance of money from Hassan before his brain savant would get freed, while offering different sisters to him through law enforcement, who are a witness, by the way, you're never going to testify, or you're never going to be narrating in this trial anymore, mainly due to the fact that you've been caught lying, and we're going to have to go through every single phone conversation only because national security is not a joke. But you made it a joke on November 20th when you got your former sisters to lie for you, and you made it a joke when you were lying in early January as well. But if you find out that you were making national security a joke by using it for your own personal agenda of locking up someone's brain savant only because you're not getting any of the money for yourself and you're scared that Hassan's mother is going to get the money after his brain savant's freed, then you're never going to be able to narrate in this trial anymore, because national security is not a joke, and we're going to go through each and every single phone conversation to find out if what you narrated was a lie or not while you were abusing everyone in this trial, and very aggressively. So they found the phone conversations, each and every one, only to find out that every single thing my dad, the greedy framer, said in April after I refused to sleep with his different sisters. He tried different ones, by the way. February 11th and March 7th, he tried for the greedy framer, the big fat ugly old woman. He tried offering the big fat ugly old woman on March 10th and every single day afterwards. And he even tried his ugly old disgusting looking wife on March 12th. And right now he's been trying his in-laws and trying to see if I would be willing to sleep with any of his in-laws for giving him illegal assurance of money. Yes. Yes. And he even tried Ibrahim's big fat ugly old mother on February 11th at 3:56 a.m. He tried everything for illegal assurance of money, and he saw that there was nothing he could get. And then he went back to court very aggressively, making all those statements that were complete total lies in early April, only to be found out from phone conversations retrieved that they were complete and total lies. Now, the other thing, except for lies, that my dad does, now, he used national security for his own personal motive of locking up my brain savant, only so that my mother cannot get any of the money that he cannot get. Absolutely illegal, absolutely wrong, okay? You cannot use national security for your own personal motives like that. He lied on November 20th. He begged his framer sisters to lie for him November 20th. Then he lied early January. He begged his framer sisters to lie along with him in early January, already confessed lies to the government informant. Then he lied aggressively, very aggressively, abusing everyone in court in early April. He was told by the judge in April, Mr. Ansari, if you're caught lying again while abusing everyone in court, you will never be allowed to narrate in this trial anymore, because you've already used national security for your own personal motives in November 20th by begging your sisters to make a false testimony that caused mass panic and chaos throughout the entire news media. You lied again throughout the entire month month of January and until February the 10th, only to lock up San's brain savant so that his mother cannot get any of the brain savant money that you cannot get. You cannot use national security for your own personal motives. We will go through every single phone conversations only because national security is not a joke. But if we find out you were lying while abusing everyone in this trial in April, again for the third time, after asking San if he was willing to sleep with your different sisters and give you illegal assurances of millions of euros after his brain savant would get freed, you're never going to narrate in this trial again. And as soon as the phone conversations were retrieved, you got to remember, even at this time, he's sending me blackmail price tags for millions of euros out of hope that I would just succumb to all the torture and just be like, just take it or something like that, even though that's not what happened. But when the phone conversations were retrieved in April, I told the judge, I was like, Your Honor, you're going to find out from the phone conversations just retrieved that every single thing my dad, the greedy framer, said again in the month of April were complete and total lies from the facts and evidences from the phone conversations just retrieved. And that's exactly what they found out. Every single thing he said in April was a complete and total lie, and he was kicked out of the trial. Now, the thing about my dad, the greedy framer, is after the lies, he has other tricks up his sleeves. Obviously, yes, the blackmail price tags and incest requests and all of this. He's gone crazy with the money potential that artificial intelligence has marked on my brain savant, but apparently he was acting like he didn't believe in it when he was allowed to narrate in the trial in the starting. So, excuse me, the main thing that he uses now is that he makes up a short story. So he's basically going to make up a story about how I was overseas, and then he got a phone call from the FBI, and they told him about something that had happened with someone else. Now, he is going to make up the story that it was due to me being overseas that I wasn't involved in this crime, blah, 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 this and that. We have to look at facts and evidences on this storytelling, by the way, mainly due to the fact that not only is my dad, the greedy framer, a verified liar, but also due to the fact that he's also a criminal who's banned from the US and England, and now he's shown his motive as being extreme greed and envy for money, even offering me incest with his in-laws recently after his sisters and his wife failed. So basically, we have to look at facts and evidences over here, and the facts and evidences will clearly show and prove that my dad, the greedy framer, first of all, had absolutely no effect or influence on my life or environment in the least bit while I was overseas or ever in my life. My custody was always with my mother. I never even lived in the same country as my dad, the greedy framer. Even when I was overseas, you could look at the plane tickets. He was not even ever in the same country as me, even when I was overseas or any time in my life. I've only met him about 3 times in my life, and one of those times was in 2011 when I saw him encouraging people to go join terror groups, and now he's banned from multiple countries. Well, put 1 and 1 together, you'll get 2. You'll find out exactly why he's been banned. Well, anyways, the fact of the matter is that I have never even lived in the same country as my dad, the greedy framer, ever in my life. Even when I was overseas, his plane tickets will clearly show and prove that him and I never even lived in the same country together, ever. Ever in my life. We never talked on the phone, making it impossible for someone whom I've never lived with or have had even in the same country or have even talked to on the phone to have had any influence on my life or environment whatsoever. Whereas my custody was with my mother the entire time, and not only that, she always paid for my personal necessities like food, water, transportation, and even exam fees, even when I was living overseas. Now, the thing that you have to understand about my dad, the greedy framer, is not only is he a verified liar, but there are other aspects as well. Yes, he's a criminal compared to my mother, who has never even uttered one word considered bad my entire life. Now, this notion that he's trying to make about me that I could have been in this crime scene or this or that cannot be possible. Mainly due to the fact that my mother had made a promise to law enforcement when I was an 11-year-old child, letting them know that she had forced necessity as a single mother in putting me in anywhere that would watch me for free until she had to go to work at fast food restaurants or in factories at nighttime. And the other biggest proof of an evidence of this fact is the fact that I was a member of PAL. PAL is basically for single mothers who work at fast food restaurants and they cannot afford daycare. So there are very nice police officers that are willing to watch children, and they've made a little center, a community center. It's called the PAL Center, and children can go there and wait for their parents till their parents would get off from work so that they could go and stay there. August 11th at 7:30 p.m., my mother said this on record without me changing her words in any way, shape, or form possible. 27 years ago, when I was a 9-year-old child, she remembers it really well. She had to go sign me up at the PAL Center only because of force and necessity of a single mother not having anyone to watch me for free. Clearly showing from facts and evidences, proving from facts and evidences the fact that my mother had this problem only until I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, and afterwards I was never seen in any settings where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me by one of law enforcement's BFFs ever. Now, the thing from even the last video that you would have to keep in mind is the fact that it could only be something being said and not done, whereas my dad, the greedy framer, was encouraging people to go join terror groups. He got caught in doing so, which is why he's now banned. That is a crime, by the way. But there's no crime ever committed around me. Even as a child, there was nothing even remotely considered bad ever done. There was no crime attempted, and there was no conspiracy to commit any crimes around me as a child. Now, the thing that you have to understand is the fact that before we get into I'm only human, you have to understand the fact that these short stories that my dad, the greedy framer, found out about, obviously he will try to exaggerate them, like how he did November 20th. He tried to exaggerate lies all throughout the month of January, only to be found out that they were all complete total lies. Not one thing he said the entire month of January was true, and yet he was exaggerating it to the point of extremity, despite it not even being true, only to make sure that my brain savant would get locked up so that my mother cannot get the money that he cannot get. So then again, once again in April, my dad, the greedy framer, is lying once again to the most extreme level possible to make sure my brain savant cannot get freed, only for the facts and evidences from the phone conversations retreat to come out to find out that every single thing that he was saying was a lie, and he was exaggerating it to the most extreme level possible. Now, the thing about the short stories is he's going to try to find short stories for when I was overseas about someone committing some sort of a crime or something along that sort or nature. Now, I'm not going to have anything to do with it, obviously, but facts and evidences will also prove that even if I was in the US, I would have had absolutely nothing to do with it. How do we know this? Mainly due to the fact that unlike law enforcement, who was in every setting right now as we speak, running sex schemes with Uncle Joey's in-laws and money fraud that have been run for years and years, only stopped about 2 months ago, law enforcement basically unlike law enforcement, my mother took me out of every setting no longer needed as soon as I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, which means that as soon as I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, I was never in any settings where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again. Okay, so basically, yes, not even any settings where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again in my life, which means that for years after I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, I lived with my mother. I lived with my mother alone, and before I went anywhere, and even when I went overseas, I was only living with my mother. She was the only person I talked to, only house I came back to. Even especially after 2016, I only lived on the streets or my mother's apartment. And yes, and so basically, even when I was overseas, I never even lived in the same country as my dad, the greedy framer. Never talked to him on the phone, making it impossible for him to have had any effect or influence on my life whatsoever. Not only that, my mother had custody of me. She was paying for my basic necessities like food, clothing, transportation, exam fees. And not only that, you also have the fact that I was only talking to her every single day. He wasn't even living in the same country with me. There were not even talking on the phone, having absolutely no effect on my life or environment whatsoever, being impossible, by the way. So basically, this short story would not apply to me. First of all, I would have absolutely nothing to do with it. Second of all, I could not have had anything to do with it even if I was in the US. You have to remember the fact that even when I was in the US, you have to remember the fact that after I gained a situs beta mental maturity as a child, not only did I not only did I no longer need to go to the PAL Center anymore that my mother had signed me up for, she no longer had to put me with random people to adult supervise me anymore either. So neither one of those things were needed anymore. After which time I stayed with my mother for years before I went overseas. And even when I was overseas, I was only living with my mother, never even lived in the same country as my dad, the greeter framer, never talked to him on the phone, never was under the influence or effect of anyone, including his wife, whom I never talked to. She only abused, put acid in my clothes or do stuff of that sort. Never lived with my dad, the greedy framer, ever in my life, not even in the same country, never talked to him on the phone, making it impossible for him to have had any influence on my life or environment whatsoever. So basically, yes, before I even went overseas, I was living with my mother. I was talking to her. She was paying for my basic necessities, food, water, clothing, transportation, exam fees, and I was coming back to her house. And after a while, I was only living on the streets or coming back to her house till I got my PharmD degree with 0 loans. So basically, yes, I lived with my mother for years after the PAL membership was no longer needed, and after I was no longer needed to be adult supervised by anyone willing to watch me for free, who happened to be law enforcement's own BFS, who could have said something even remotely considered bad, but that wouldn't be a crime like what my dad, the Grady Framer, was doing in 2011, forcing law enforcement to put a government informant in there. And you can ask the government informant exactly why he was put in there. But I lived with my mother for years before I went overseas. And I was never even remotely present in any settings where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me, ever, for years, not even once. After her force and necessity ended, the moment I became even slightly mentally mature, after which time I never had to go to the PAL Center or be adult supervised by any of law enforcement's BFFs ever again. So the facts and evidences have to be looked at, and these exaggerated stories by a person like my dad, the greedy framer, who is a verified liar. Not only did he exaggerate November 20th to the point where his framer sisters did it for him, he asked them to do so, and to the point where no news anchor could smile on live TV after November 20th, he exaggerated lies in early January 2026, causing mass panic and chaos, only to be found out as being confessed lies. And then he exaggerated more lies in early April 2026, only for the facts and evidences from the phone conversations to come out and find out that these exaggerated statements were all lies. Now he tries to exaggerate a short story that has absolutely nothing to do with me in the first place. But you have to look at the facts and evidences here, only to find out that even if I was living in the US, I would have been living in the US like how I was after I gained the situs beta mental maturity and no longer needed adult supervision anymore, and I would have been living in the US with my mother and my mother alone, never needing to be adult supervised by any of law enforcement's BFFs like Uncle Joey ever again, or needing to go to the PAL Center, which was specifically designed for single mothers working in fast food restaurants who do not have the money to put their children in daycare, and they just leave them after signing up for the PAL Center so that the nice police officers would wash their children for free while the mothers would be working. So basically, yes, as soon as the force and necessity ended, I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child. The facts and evidences will clearly prove the fact that I was never seen in any settings where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said and not done by one of law enforcement's own BFFs. There was no crime committed, no crime attempted. There was no crime conspired to be attempted either. Nothing planned out, nothing attempted, nothing done. Unlike what my dad, the Greedy Framer, was doing in 2011, where he was encouraging people to go join terror groups. One of those people ended up being a government informant, due to which my dad is now banned from multiple countries. So even when I was being adult supervised by one of law enforcement's own BFFs, first of all, my mother had already gotten permission from law enforcement for me to be there in the first place. Second of all, it was due to force and necessity of a single mother, not only proven from my mother saying this to law enforcement when I was an 11-year-old child, but also with the PAL membership, clearly proving that it was a center designed for single mothers working at fast food restaurants who could not afford daycare and had put their children in that center for free to be adult supervised by police officers. So basically, yes. Yeah. So the facts and evidences have to be looked at, and not a verified liar, an exaggerator who's been caught numerous times, like my dad, the Greedy Framer, who was already kicked out and banned from this trial, by the way, after April. Not him. But the facts and evidences will clearly show and prove to the courts the fact that after my mother's forced necessity as a single mother went out, I was never seen in any settings no longer needed, whether it was a law enforcement's own BFS like Uncle Joey or anyone else, where never again did anyone even remotely say anything, even remotely considered bad around me as a child ever again in my life after I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity as a child. So this short story that my dad tries to exaggerate, first of all, it has nothing to do with me. I was never living with him. Even when I was overseas, I was living with my mother, who paid for my basic necessities like food, water, transportation, exam fees, and my photo stage shop notes getting photocopied. I would go back to her house and go back eventually to sleeping on the side of the streets near my overseas pharmacy school, never even seeing anyone even remotely near my dad, the Greedy Framer, ever again. But it was only my mother that I was living with overseas. She had my custody. She was paying for my basic necessities. I never even lived in the same country as my dad, the Greedy Framer. The plane tickets will prove. Never talked to him on the phone, making it impossible for him to have had any influence on my life or environment whatsoever. These short stories, by the way, have nothing to do with me, and the facts and evidences will be clearly looked at to prove also the fact that even if I was living in the U.S., you have to look at how I was living in the U.S. from the moment my mother's force and necessity ended, when I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, till this very day today. I no longer needed adult supervision anymore, and I was never in any settings where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again. Now, after I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, for years and years before I even went overseas, I was living with my mother, and clearly shows from facts and evidences clearly proving the fact that I was no longer needing adult supervision, neither from law enforcement's BFFs like Uncle Joey or the PAL Center that I was a member of, but also the fact that I was never in any settings where anything you remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again throughout my entire life for years, not one instance before I went overseas, clearly proving from facts and evidences that even if I was living with my mother at that time, I would forget a crime that I'd never even had anything to do with. Even as a child, it would only be anything you remotely considered bad being said around me. After I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity, I wasn't even present in a setting where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again, as the facts and evidences will clearly prove. So if first of all, I wouldn't have anything to do with this short story that my dad, the Greedy Framer, is trying very desperately exaggerate now that all his lies have been caught. But let's say I was living in the U.S. with my mother, I would still definitely not have anything to do with it, considering the statistical probability of me not even remotely being seen in a setting where anything you remotely considered bad could be said around me from the moment I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity for years afterwards till I even went overseas or anywhere else, not for years even remotely being present in a setting where anything even remotely considered bad could be said around me from the moment I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity till the moment I went overseas. Those were years time period. Not one time was I seen around Uncle Joey or any of law enforcement's BFFs that they run sex schemes or money fraud with for years after I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity, until the moment I went overseas. So after I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, till I went overseas, were years and years, those entire years, I was never once seen in any setting where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me ever again, clearly proving that a statistical chance that a person who's not even remotely present in a setting where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around him ever in his life. No, even for years and years in his life, cannot possibly be present in a crime scene, considering the fact that he's never, ever in his life been present in a crime scene to begin with. So let me repeat that statement one more time. The statistical probability of someone who's not been present in a setting where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around him for years of his life before he went overseas would be almost impossible for him to be present in a setting where that would be considered a crime scene, considering the fact that even when I was a child, I was never present in a setting where that could be a crime scene. My mother would never leave me in a setting, well, she didn't know she wasn't ever present there. The facts and evidence will clearly prove that. But even then, it was never a crime scene, but the probability of me suddenly appearing in a crime scene, despite never being not even being seen in a setting where anything remotely considered bad was said around me after I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity, is absolutely nonsensical. It's not possible. I was never present in any crime scenes ever in my life, and after I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity as a child, I was never even present in a setting where anything even remotely considered bad could have been said around me, clearly proving from facts and evidences that the statistical chance that I would suddenly, after not being even remotely present in a setting where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around me, to suddenly being present in a setting where that would be considered a crime scene is impossible, first of all. And the second thing is, I had a brain scanner attached to my brain for years, proving that the effect of me or my mother taking me out of every setting where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around me, the moment I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity, making sure that no settings were like Uncle Joey, law enforcement's BFF, or other people that they ran sex schemes or money fraud with, was ever present around me ever again, nor did I ever have to go to the PAL Center anymore, which was a great place, by the way, to be adult supervised for free, clearly proving from the brain scanner evidence that it had a huge amount of effect on me, mainly due to the fact that I was an amazing human being. Not saying that anyone was a bad person, but the brain scanner clearly proved that I developed my mother's character. I loved every single person the same way I would meet everyone of every race, religion, ethnicity, whether they were Christian people or Orthodox Jewish people with long beards, and they give me advices on taking zinc, and I would give them literally more love inside my heart than I would normal people, knowing that they were people that had big beards and people might have been racist towards them, but I love people a lot. And equally, as the brain scanner evidence will clearly prove to the courts, the fact that these are just short stories that my dad, the Greedy Framer, is now trying to prove, he's now trying to push forward in this court really aggressively after his lies on November 20th have been caught. His lies in early January have been caught. By the way, early January was very aggressively pushed forward, only exaggerated very badly, only to be found out as complete and total lies confessed to the government informant for November 20th, and then early April obviously very aggressively made, considering the fact that I was not interested in incest with his big fat ugly old sisters or his ugly disgusting looking wife, and now even trying incest with his in-laws. He couldn't get illegal assurance of money from me, and so yes, he abused everyone in court in early April. Now all he has are short stories that have nothing to do with me, but this video, I'm hoping, will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these short stories stories could not have had anything to do with me, whether I was living overseas, in this country, anywhere in the world, due to the fact that my mother had already taken me out of every setting, no longer needed, whether it was law enforcement BFFs like Uncle Joey or the PAL Center that was no longer needed to watch me for free by police officers after my mother's force and necessity ended after I gained a slight bit of mental maturity. So the statistical probability that a person who hasn't even remotely been present in a setting where anything you remotely considered bad could have been said around him for years from the moment he gained the slightest bit of mental maturity before he went overseas. So after I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity and before I went overseas, there were years where I wasn't even remotely present in a setting where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around me, making it impossible for me to be present in the crime scene in the first place, since my mother never left me in any settings, whether it was law enforcement's BFFs like Uncle Joey or the other ones that they run sex scenes and money fraud with, or the PAL Center, which was no longer needed. That was the only reason why. So the probability that I would suddenly appear in a crime scene is absolutely berserk. It's bizarre. It's not true at all. So, yes, this short story is exaggerated, but exaggerated against a person like me, whom it has nothing to do with. But even if I was living in the U.S., the facts and evidences clearly prove from the entire time I was living with my mother, from the moment I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity till I went overseas, were years during which time I was never even remotely present in a setting where anything remotely considered bad could have been said around me. And so a crime scene would be almost impossible for me to be present in. And even before I gained the slightest bit of mental maturity, I was only present at the PAL Center, which would watch me and adult supervise me for free from my single mother, or one of law enforcement's own BFFs like Uncle Joey, whom they ran sex schemes and money fraud with. But even during that small time period, it was only something even remotely considered bad that could have been said around me, and not like one of the crimes that law enforcement witnessed themselves in 2011, my dad, the Greedy Framer, committing by encouraging people to go join terror groups, due to which they had to put a government informant in there. So the next video I'm going to make is about how I'm only a human being, and how I could not choose my background till I gained a slightest bit of mental maturity in life, but that afterwards I chose, I had an excellent life, a perfect life with my mother, and even before then, it was only something remotely considered bad that could have been said around me, and not a crime like what my dad, the Greedy Framer, was committing in 2011 by encouraging people to go join terror groups, due to which he's banned in the US and England right now. Thank you.